Ever wonder why we listen to a piece about a battle between the Russian and the French on Independence Day? Probably because freedom and cannons! Hi, welcome to the Listener's Guide. I'm Steve, and the 1812 Overture is probably one of the most misunderstood pieces that has made it into the public conscience. Anytime we hear it in America, it's usually accompanied by patriotic pyrotechnics. Try saying that 10 times fast. Many of us assume that this is about America since it's about a year in which we too had a war against our former colonial oppressors, but the song commemorating that war is, well, it's our national anthem, so it hasn't exactly been forgotten. But this piece happens to be about something that happened across the Atlantic Ocean. In the fall of 1812, Napoleon invaded Russia and was actually moderately successful for a while, but as anyone knows, never get involved in a land war in Russia in the cold. After a particularly bloody battle near Borodino, the Russian general Kutuzov called for a tactical retreat, and the Russian army burned Moscow as they did so, leaving the French without resources. Napoleon thus had to begin a retreat himself in October, and meanwhile lost almost all of his soldiers to starvation and illness. If you remember my video about ternary form, then you know a little bit about text painting, and you may be wondering to yourself, how can Tchaikovsky represent this story musically? Well, he has at his disposal a lot of songs that the audience would have already known so that they can make the connection to the action. For instance, the piece opens with a Russian church song called O Lord Save Thy People, representing the citizens of the country praying for the success of their soldiers against the much more powerful French army. Then you start to hear the tension ratchet up as the soldiers prepare, leading to the first time we hear the militaristic tune representing the Russian soldiers themselves. But then we return to the foreboding, tense music that gets louder and louder and louder until suddenly off in the distance we can hear it! The French national anthem! They're coming! The Tsar then pleads with his people to protect their motherland, which is represented by a Russian folk song called At the Gate. This use of folk tunes was really common in the 1800s as part of European nationalism. The audience would have recognized the tune, known that it represented Russia, and felt very proud. But the song is cut short as the tension ratchets back up with the approach of the French army. We hear a lot of back and forth between this generally tense music At the Gate and the French national anthem until cannons! I'm not even kidding. The original score calls for the use of cannons, and if you can find a recording or even better, a performance that uses actual cannons, it makes a huge difference. But anyway, with the French victory at the end of the battle, we get this stupidly long transition. It's okay, Tchaikovsky thought it was stupid too. And we finally hear the return of the church song with bells, bells, bells! Whenever Russian composers represent celebration in music, you can bet that there will be church bells, and in this case, they're thanking God for the protection that they prayed for at the beginning of the piece. And then of course we have to celebrate the victorious military directly, this time supported by the anthem God Save the Tsar. And cannons! So this Independence Day, when you're celebrating with fireworks, you can chuckle smugly to yourself knowing that you're actually paying homage to the victorious Russians on America's national holiday, but I guess it doesn't really matter because freedom and cannons!